Welcome to the show, folks. It is Friday, and if you've made it this far, congratulations. It's the end of the week. I'm your host, Max Burns. Happy Juneteenth to those of you who are watching live. For the next half hour, we're going to break down the biggest stories in the news and laugh along the way, because that's about all we can do anymore. You can follow me on Twitter at @TheMaxBurns. Follow us on YouTube at Lincoln Square Media and on Substack at Lincoln Square. And as always, leave your comments during the show. I read every single comment on all of the social media channels, even though that is a terrible idea for my mental health these days. And in just a few minutes, we're going to be joined by the great Nayyera Haq. It's going to be an amazing show. She's a foreign policy expert, a regular guest across the cable news world. You've also seen her as my colleague on SiriusXM Progress 127, where she is guest hosting all the time. Now, I am excited because she's going to class up our little ragtag operation. And as you can see, she's thrilled to be here. Now, I'm glad to see that she survived the week. I'm hoping you survived the week. For those of you watching, I wonder if you can tell me what's going on in this clip we're going to play right now. Amazing work. Did you guess it? That's Scottish revelers who are in Boston for the World Cup, and they were tossing a traffic cone onto the statue of Samuel Adams, which I'm told is a storied Scottish tradition. This dates back to the ancient days of the 1980s, so since nobody was alive then, we only have the legends to guide us. They weren't able to toss it up there, but they did eventually climb up and put the traffic cone on the head. Wonderful people. I'm glad they feel so at home. Honestly, seems like a great time. Now, that is not one of our 5 biggest stories for the week, but here's one that is. Donald Trump getting more and more and more bad news. The only direction Trump seems to go these days is down. New PBS, NPR, and Marist poll shows Trump hitting an all-time low in approval of the economy. Just 33% of Americans think he's doing a good job, with almost 80% of Americans saying that gas prices are hurting their financial bottom line. People not feeling great about the economy, and this is pretty broad-based as well. 64% of independents say they disapprove of the job Trump is doing in fighting inflation, and 1 in 5, that's 20% nearly, of Republicans say that Trump is failing at dealing with the economy. Now, I think we have a video here of voters letting Trump know exactly how they feel about rising prices. Oh, here it comes. Boom. Oh, yes, perfect. I love that he backs up too. That's our robot friend. You've seen him before on the show. You'll see him again. He's hilarious. I love him. Pretty much sums up Donald Trump's entire presidency up to this point. Now, voters are in an incredibly sour mood this summer. Only a third of them say that they're in a financial position to take a vacation. That's one of the lowest levels ever recorded in the Marist survey. Now, think about this. People can't take vacations. They can't afford a vacation. They can barely afford a cookout because ground beef is almost $7, $8 a pound. Gas prices are still stubbornly high, even though Donald Trump is pledging to end the war in Iran, says he has an agreement. Not great if your goal is to try and hold the House and the Senate in the midterms. And that's exactly where Trump finds himself, talking to Republican senators and Republican members of the House who are not thrilled with the way Donald Trump is managing things. And something rare is happening here, folks. Republicans are actually learning how to say no to Donald Trump, even if that means making big old Mr. Trump mad. Now, if Trump is unpopular with voters, he isn't doing that much better with his colleagues over on Capitol Hill, at least not if this week is any indication. If you look at this story from the Wall Street Journal, they're reporting now that Trump's Republican colleagues in the Senate are finally recognizing that he's steering them into an electoral disaster. Now, Democrats have been saying this since 2024. You guys didn't listen. Now you're going to have to pay the price. Wall Street Journal is reporting that Senate Majority Leader John Thune is getting used to saying no to Trump, including this week after Trump demanded Republicans take up his voter suppression bill again. That's the Save America Act, a bill that even Republican attorneys general say doesn't do anything to make elections safer, but does do a lot to make them more expensive for states to run. And that's kind of the point. This is all part of Trump's effort to move power back toward the federal government and reclaim control over elections ahead of the midterms. That's not looking good. This bill died in the Senate earlier this year. Republicans could barely get over a filibuster to even bring it up for a debate. They didn't have the votes to pass it. And with the spring recess, Republicans were thrilled to be able to run away from this thing. It was like tossing a bomb back toward Trump. You can't really say that anymore. The Secret Service is going to visit me for that one. But now it's back up, or at least Trump would like it to be. Republicans in the Senate have absolutely no plan to bring this up this year, mainly because they don't want to be debating one of the most unpopular bills they've ever put up, right as they're trying to win the midterms. Now, if this is familiar to you, you're not alone. Donald Trump's second term is starting to look a lot like this. Halfway measures, bills that are pushed and abandoned, negotiations that are started and dropped, confirmation votes that are announced and then canceled, like our new director of national intelligence, who was just dropped from confirmation hearings less than a week after Trump nominated him. So I guess Bill Pulte's going to keep hanging out. Now, Trump's second term is already pretty light on legislation, and it's on track to become even lighter. At this rate, we're looking at Donald Trump becoming a lame duck president even before the midterm elections. That might be a record. Yet another first for Donald Trump. And he's pretty good at setting these things up, except just not any of the things you would want to set records for. Record high prices, record low opinion in the world, record low trust in government among Americans, and now a guy who can't even get Republicans to support voter suppression. Imagine how unpopular you've got to be for Republicans to say, we don't want to suppress the vote. That's just too unpopular for us. Remarkable stuff. Now, among other great victories Donald Trump has had this week that have had Republicans cheering for him, the reflecting pool, a $14 million boondoggle that he painted blue because blue is hot right now. Well, as you can see here, not looking so hot. That is a big chunk of blue paint floating up to the surface of the reflecting pool, surrounded by bright green algae, which has grown back less than a week after the pool was refilled. This is why you don't paint rock, folks, and also why you don't give no-bid contracts to people who have no idea what they're doing. It is stunning. It is such a testament to what Donald Trump does to the country. A quick paint job on the reflecting pool. Don't worry if it comes up in a week. Don't worry if it's covered in more algae now than it was when he was complaining about it under Joe Biden. He said he'd do it, and he did it. He never said it would be good. Speaking of things that are already pretty bad for Americans, go to our next story on the rising cost of healthcare. Now, one of the challenges that Americans have faced, if you've not been living under a rock, is that Republicans refuse to update and expend the Affordable Care Act subsidies. That raised prices almost by double for healthcare for millions of Americans, about 22 million people. Most of those people are in red states. In other words, they're the same Republicans that Republicans need to convince to vote for them in November if they want any chance of holding the House and the Senate. Well, they said the $100 billion it would cost to do that was just too expensive. So, of course, they spent $110 billion on the war in Iran. Great work, guys. Now there's a new poll out. This is a Gallup poll that shows even more bad news for Trump. It shows that fewer than half of Americans say they can afford their health care now. If you don't think people are going to go out and vote on that, you might be Donald Trump. This comes after the GOP refused to extend the Affordable Care Act subsidies, after they spent the money on the war in Iran, after they built that terrible reflecting pool paint job, after they tried to get taxpayers to fund $600 million for a ballroom, and after Donald Trump decided to take most of the summer off. This White House ballroom, reflecting pool, I'm sure that's right. What people don't know about it is those are actually made of medicine. So just go drink out of the reflecting pool, go take a bite out of the White House ballroom, and you'll be all better from whatever ails you. Now, the numbers are terrifying here, guys. About 2.8 million Americans identify now as no longer being able to cost secure for their health care, which in regular English means they can't afford their medicine. 2.8 million Americans. That's the largest one-year jump in that number in history. And 40% of Americans now say that they worry about even being able to visit the doctor at all. Good luck telling that to Donald Trump, who's been to the doctor about 14 times this year, and he doesn't seem to want to tell us why. It's also an all-time high, by the way, that 40% of Americans who say that they probably can't even afford to see a doctor. Really great job. Which just reminds me of something I've often said, and something I think Democrats need to remind voters of all this year. The greatest way to convince Americans to vote for Democrats? Just give them a year and a half of Republicans. Everything we've seen is absolute chaos. And Donald Trump, he's having a great time. He's playing golf. He's awarding medals of honor. He's signing pieces of paper, some of his favorite things to do. He doesn't know what those pieces of paper say, but he loves that he's signing them. And in the meantime, he's focused entirely on his White House arch, a gigantic Arc de Triomphe copy that, despite what Donald Trump says, is not going to cure cancer and may actually cause a flight risk for planes landing at Ronald Reagan National Airport. Great. Even more satisfaction for people flying into D.C. This is exactly what Democrats have warned about. This is what Kamala Harris warned about on the campaign trail. But voters, they wanted something different. And I'll tell you, that raises a really interesting point. Because when voters feel like the economy is bad, like they did under Joe Biden, when voters feel like inflation is up, when voters feel like they're getting poorer, it doesn't matter what you tell them. It could be the truth. Kamala Harris said Donald Trump would get us into war in the Middle East, and he did. Kamala Harris said Donald Trump would raise prices for you at the pump, at the grocery store, at your pharmacy, and he did. But it didn't matter. Voters were upset. They felt poor. They felt like they didn't have a handle on their own lives anymore. So they supported Donald Trump. And what happened? Exactly what Democrats said. Now Donald Trump is in the exact same situation. He's busy telling Americans that he loves the inflation. And oh, by the way, inflation isn't real. And by the way, again, I fixed inflation. But voters can feel it with their wallets. They feel poorer than ever. Polls show it. The public opinion surveys show it. Voters themselves are saying it, even in red states, and especially in the swing districts Republicans need. When voters can barely afford food or medicine, guys, you're not going to convince them that everything is great because we can build a big arch. Just not the way things work. And if Donald Trump wants to know how it works to pretend like these things aren't happening, well, he can just ask Joe Biden, see how that went for him. We have some comments here. Carol Sanders says, I saw a meme that showed the reflecting pool from above and the grass next to it and pointed out the grass is not as green as the pool. Absolutely true. Looked better when it was empty. But now, I guess, the White House's latest line is, you know what, we meant for this. Green is what we actually wanted. Nobody complains when Chicago dyes the Chicago River green for St. Patrick's Day. People love that. Why are they mad at Trump for making the reflecting pool green? All part of the plan. We may have said blue, but you know what? Blue is lame. Who needs blue? And Carol also says that law enforcement, for the purpose of prosecution, still has not identified the terrorist who destroyed the East Wing of the People's House. We are hot on the case of that. I have some promising leads. We have ice on it. Figure they'll beat a bunch of people and jail a bunch of innocent American citizens. Eventually, we'll figure out who's behind the destruction of the East Wing. Now let's jump to one more story here that is interesting and popping up because the Supreme Court is acting up again in yet another pro-gun decision that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's the High Court in more ways than one, guys. Good news for drug users, too, because you can own a gun again. Isn't that great? What we can all agree on, more drug users should own guns. Now, in their unending quest to ensure that every man, woman, and child in America can buy a gun without any conditions whatsoever, the Supreme Court ruled this week that Americans with a history of past drug use can legally buy guns again. Now, before this, there was a federal law that if you were using illegal drugs or addicted to drugs, you were barred from buying a gun. You may remember this law because it's what got Hunter Biden in trouble when he lied on a federal forum saying he wasn't a drug user. He was quite a drug user. Now, under this new law, Hunter Biden would be able to buy that gun no problem. Now, this is an interesting case because I'm not an anti-weed guy. I'm really not. I mean, this seems to me, though, like it's about so much more than just drugs, right? This is about expanding the legislation and expanding our conception of gun rights to be so maximalist that there is virtually no circumstance in which you can be denied a gun ever. Under this new law, because you can't be barred from having done drugs in the past or even recently, as long as you don't self-identify as currently being addicted to drugs, you're able to buy the gun, no problem. That creates an interesting scenario where you need to be actively high and also admit to being addicted to drugs at the moment you're buying the gun in order for that gun license to be denied. Now, you may think that's a crazy thought, but it's not. We've been here before. The Supreme Court earlier this year said that domestic abusers would be able to own firearms as long as they don't pose an imminent safety threat to people around them. So basically, as long as you're not beating your wife at the moment you bought the gun, you could say, yeah, I've been charged with domestic abuse, I've been convicted, but that's all behind me now. Same thing with the weed case. And what's next? Who knows? With all of these things falling and the rules around gun ownership getting weaker and weaker, who knows what next session is going to bring for the Supreme Court? It is a disaster for gun rights. And even more concerning, that this was unanimous. 9 justices, including all the Democrats, supported it. Truly, truly bizarre. Now, I believe we may have the delightful and wonderful foreign policy expert Nayyera Haq with us at last. I'm not sure. Let's make sure.
Hi.
Nayyera, how are you?
Good. It's great to be on with you. And thanks for, I'm glad that everybody is still engaged. I was listening very closely to what you were talking about with
You have saved all of the people watching.
Insane. It really, truly is insane that we can parse the details of the law in this way with gun rights, but there's no other rights that get to be that expansive. Voting rights don't get to be that expansive. Civil liberties and the right to protest, that's not expansive. But apparently when it comes to guns, they will nickel and dime every aspect of the law to make sure that guns get into the hands of anybody.
And it seems to me like this is we talk about this as a Republican plan, and it certainly is. But all 9 justices supported this. The Democrats went for this too. I mean, what are they thinking?
I honestly, I don't understand. And I get that the court looks at the intent of the law and then more, they look at not just the case itself, but how this sets precedents and what the impact would be for the theory of the law. But we're in a court system right now where the lawyers and the judges are not really abiding by the theory of the law anymore. So you have the conservatives and the federalists who are doing what they can to make political decisions from the bench. And then the Democrats are sitting there being like, well, we have to protect the ways things have always been. And really, it's the Democrats and the traditionalists and those who are all about civil liberties and norms. Those things are great, but you have to understand that we're not working on the same foundation. It's not equal footing anymore, right? And so this has to be a reimagining of how the Constitution is being applied in real time. And the fact that the arc of the moral universe is long and it may bend towards justice, but that's only because people are responding in real time to what's happening around them and trying to adapt to that, not this idea that if we just continue to do the way things have always been, we'll get back to normal.
Yeah. And the irony of this case specifically is that the White House and Donald Trump were actually defending the federal law that bans people who have drug use in their past from owning guns, in large part because the person who was arrested was a dual citizen. He's non-white, and he sort of represents the kind of people Donald Trump wants to get out of the country. So Republicans were pretty upset that their Republican president was out at the Supreme Court arguing really stridently for gun control, while the NRA was out there arguing against it. I mean, where do you see this moving now?
I have a hard time predicting where some of these things are going to go, because
Yeah.
we are in this moment where, unless you look at the very specific jurisdiction and the personality that is in place, right? We're not working with the norms and the standards we had. We're working with personalities who are making decisions, and then, all right, how can we appeal that decision? Where is it going to go? But is it going to go to another politicized place? So I leave the prediction of these types of cases, the specific cases, to people who are far more aware of legal policy than I am. But what I will say
Yeah.
is that I do know that many lawyers I've talked to, many people in the judicial system, recognize that they need to be doing something more fundamental and not just applying case law from the past. They need to be looking ahead and reinterpreting where things are going.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a comment from Antonio. He says, the Supreme Court ruled that all constitutional amendments are equal in weight. Stop separating the constitutional amendments. Not sure what that means, but don't tell that to the Fourth Amendment, which has been gutted so much that police can now effectively search you without a warrant for any reason that they want.
Well, and then, the idea of the 13th Amendment. And yet we
Yeah,
have legalized slavery in this country, when if you are put in jail, you can be forced to work for $1 an hour, right? Or even $1 a
yeah,
day, right? We have forced labor in this country. And I appreciate that point so much for that reason, which is it's the way that things get challenged and refined is because a court case has been brought, and then the
yep,
judges have to refine it. So the NRA has brought a lot of cases to expand the meaning of the Second Amendment. If cases aren't brought, if there's not a movement to expand the meaning of other amendments, and in fact to narrow the 13th, to narrow the Voting Rights Act, then yes, the
yeah,
law moves in a more constrictive direction. But that requires a lot of money and energy and attention. And unfortunately, that money and attention is what is making the system move right now, not a broader sense of values of keeping things equal.
yeah. And certainly in the legal sense, at least what Congress has done is certainly not equal. We have a comment from Maureen who says the CDC is prevented by law from doing research into ways to solve the problem of people being shot by guns.
Yes.
That's true. There's a federal ban on gun violence research. I mean, equality, I don't know where he's getting that one from.
The idea that looking at guns as a healthcare issue has been a fight. Just to look at it as a healthcare issue.
Yeah,
The Biden administration got funding for CDC specifically to look at gun deaths and what are some of the correlations, what are some of the causations, and what impact they have on the healthcare outcomes of the community. We already know by science and by data that if there is a gun involved in a dispute or in a fight, then yes, it makes a murder or a death far more likely, right? Like killing is more likely.
yeah.
We know that, but apparently, in order to be able to put this into law, to really have this become part of the public consciousness, you need more research, you need more data. And so by the Trump administration stopping that, they can just say, it's all in your head. It's made up. None of this is true.
That is the Republican line. And speaking of things that seem to be all in Donald Trump's head, I want to get to our big story. I wanted to wait until you were here to talk about this because this is your area and I am a moron. Donald Trump has a draft agreement to end the war in Iran, and Republicans are not happy with what they're reading. One block of GOP senators is even calling on Trump to abandon the plan and start over because it gives too much to Iran. Among other things, Trump's deal gives Iran $300 billion after he criticized Barack Obama for giving $150 billion in debt relief and sanctions relief in 2018. No restrictions on missile production, something Donald Trump said was his own red line. But he's signing it, and he's apparently happy to sign it. And if it doesn't go over well, we know who he's going to blame. Play that clip.
This way, if it works out, I'm going to take the credit. If it doesn't work out, I'm blaming JD. You better be careful, JD. He's going to turn his plane around and get the hell out of here. Yeah, I like that idea. I think it's a good idea. Thank you very much, everybody.
So, Nayyera, I assume you've looked at this more than the president has. What does this deal actually do?
the idea that I've looked at it more than the president has should terrify all of us, because yes, I'm a former diplomat. I've worked in the Middle East region, South Asia. I've done negotiations, and I'm not like the senior negotiator by any means, but I apparently understand the value of having multiple parties on the same page, not announcing something until it is done. Like Trump's negotiating in real time in public has only worked to the advantage of the Iranians. He went into this Iran war with an ally, Israel, and they are not happy with this deal. Iran is like, well, Trump, what you're signing is also going to commit Israel. Like you are responsible, Trump and United States, for what Israel does going forward. That is what Trump was signing today, is trying to sign. And Netanyahu and Israel are like, no, we're in southern Lebanon. We have no intent of leaving. Who are you to tell us what to do? Then you have JD Vance show up, because now Trump is like, this is JD's fault. JD's got to figure this out. JD shows up and said, yeah, Israel, no other head of state is willing to work with you or talk to you. Only the United States, so don't mess with us. That just, I mean, the can of worms that kind of statement opens, I get it. A lot of people feel like that right now. They're like, yeah, why doesn't the number one ally, the country where the United States gives them the most weapons, the most support of anybody else? Well, because that's Netanyahu. He is there for his own agenda. And his agenda has always been, A, to keep Israel on war footing so he can stay in office. And two, he believes very clearly, he's been like this for 20 years, that Iran, unless it is bombed, unless the regime is replaced, unless missiles are taken away, unless Iran is defanged the way Germany was after World War I or Japan was after World War II, Netanyahu's not going to stop. This deal gives Netanyahu none of what he wants. It doesn't give really anybody in the United States who wants a safer Middle East anything they want. And as you said, it gives Iran everything they possibly could have asked for.
Right.
I mean, everything. All the sanctions gone, even the ones that George Bush and Biden and every other bipartisan administration put away, all of those sanctions are gone.
Yeah.
And this reads like the United States admitting defeat, giving Iran whatever they want just so Iran will stop retaliating, stop hitting allies, stop, bombing the Strait of Hormuz, all of that. And what Trump wants to say is the win. He wants credit for reopening the Strait of Hormuz, which was, wait, what? Open before he started this war. Like truly, that is one thing that he can say is, oh, well, I'm opening it up again. You're the reason it's closed. And nothing that anybody on the left or right has ever talked about constraining Iran, stopping their bad behavior, none of that is part of this deal. So yeah, this is a straight win-win for Iran. For the regime, I will say. The people still suffer. It is a win for the regime in Iran.
And it isn't a peace deal, as he's talked about. This is a memorandum of understanding, the kind of thing you'd sign with a social media contractor at work. And it's infuriated plenty of Republicans. Lindsey Graham notably does not seem as if he's ready to make peace about this at all. And Marco Rubio has been oddly critical, though Rubio, as Secretary of State, has been invisible in this process. What does it say to you that our Secretary of State was out watching a UFC match instead of dealing with this situation?
Well, I mean, the president in the United States, the commander-in-chief who started this war, was also doing a UFC match and watching that. So this was this is about keeping Trump happy, which is part of problem number one. It's all about keeping Trump happy and not having him distracted the entire time. But Trump's happiness about Iran is about being able to walk away and not having to talk about it anymore. Right? It's bad in the polls. He doesn't want to, it's bad for his attention span. It's bad for the economy. So he's just looking to sign anything and walk away. Now, as you said, a memorandum of understanding is just a piece of paper. It's not a legally binding deal. And in fact, what Iran even said in this MOU is that they would recommit to denuclearizing, which is what the language was in the Obama deal. But the Obama deal had legal ways in which we would verify it. UN inspectors would be going in, all of this stuff. None of that is there. So Iran actually doesn't have to comply with anything. And an actual peace deal, there's the other piece of this, which is why I think Congress should be up in arms right now, is that they actually the Trump administration wrote in their end to the war. This is the first time they're actually admitting it's a war, which, by the way, Congress has said, if this is a war, you need to be consulting with us. We need to be approving this deal. And I will say the Obama deal had to be approved by Congress. That was a very, very big issue at the time. And Trump is just trying to get away with however he wants to do things.
Yeah. And there are currently votes in both houses that have passed about limiting Trump's war powers in Iran. Those votes are still scheduled to go forward. How does this work now? I mean, technically, this war is over, I guess, when Donald Trump says it's over. Do we still expect the Senate or the House to move forward with either of these bills?
I think we'll see what happens in the next few months. I think anticipation of a new Congress or a Democratic Congress is certainly going to put Trump's feet to the fire, which is probably also why he's trying to wrap this up, because once the investigations start about how the money has been spent, how decisions were made, how authorities were made, it's going to be hell for Trump right now. He's only been able to get away with it this far because he's had the majority and Republicans in Congress willing to bend over to his will, but even they can't go into their districts and defend the Iran war.
Yeah. Oh, Nayyera, concerned about the money. How very 2018 of you. We don't worry about the money anymore. That's all going to the ballroom.
Well, of course, we always have money for war. We don't have, or for, making fancy things. We don't have money for things like healthcare premiums or paying off student loans or really any of the other things that would be about investing in our country's future. Speaking of our country's future, thank you folks for the kindergartner who is on her first day of summer vacation is learning a lot about American politics and policy right now.
Well, she chose a great show. This is her television debut, so we chose a great show for it. And I appreciate you joining me with that last big story, and I'm glad we could get to it. We've reached the end of the week. I'm your host, Max Burns, and as always, follow Lincoln Square on Substack at Lincoln Square, on YouTube at Lincoln Square Media. You can follow me on Twitter at TheMaxBurns. Let me know every single thing I did wrong, as you always do. It's been a pleasure to have Nayyera Haq on with us today. Nayyera, how can folks keep in touch with you?
Okay, you ready? Yep, I'm going to give you my phone in a second.
You can follow Nayyera on SiriusXM Progress 127, where she is guest host. She's also a contributor on MS Now. And as you can see, children take priority. We believe in the children. And also, good luck ignoring a kid who's ready to have your attention, especially after the first day of summer starts. All right, folks, that is it for us. But if you can find even more videos on Lincoln Square, you need to watch them. You need to always be watching the videos. So get over there, start seeing. May the weekend bring you all the joy of Scottish revelers crowning an American patriot with a cap. Oh, and a robot kicking a kid in the stomach. Bye.